Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Thank you, Secretary Nielsen. As I sit here today, I'm extremely concerned about the administration's repeated attacks on some of the most vulnerable communities, and in particular children and pregnant women, as it relates to the work of DHS. And in particular, under your leadership, DHS has rescinded the DACA program, and under the leadership of the administration, predating your arrival as secretary. DHS has rescinded the DACA program, putting 700,000 young people at risk of deportation. It has separated 700 children from their parents at the border since October of 2017, including more than 100 children who are under the age of 4. The agency has released a directive that allows for more detention of pregnant women to immigrant detention facilities. The agency has instituted a new information sharing system between the Office of Refugee Resettlement and ICE that is likely to have a chilling effect on sponsors who otherwise would be willing to come forward to provide care for unaccompanied minors, and instead of allowing those children to remain in detention. The agency has dramatically increased enforcement actions that have left an untold number of both immigrant and U.S. citizen children without one or both parents, leaving some of those children in the child welfare system. And then just last Wednesday, the Washington Post reported that you are considering undermining the Flores Agreement, an agreement that ensures standards of care for immigrant children, such as the provision of meals and recreation, and that they are placed in a least restrictive setting as possible. In the course of carrying out these actions, the administration has routinely provided misleading information to this committee and has even gone so far as to claim that policies such as routinely separating families are carried out in the best interest of the child, which many consider to be cruel. So my question to you is, last Thursday, when the New York Times reported that the president has directed you to separate parents from children when they cross into the United States as a way to deter illegal immigration, is that correct? Have you been directed to separate parents from children as a method of deterrence of undocumented immigration?
I have not been directed to do that for purposes of deterrence, no.
What purpose have you been given for separating parents from their children?
So my decision has been that anyone who breaks the law will be prosecuted. If you're a parent or you're a single person or you happen to have a family, if you cross between the ports of entry, we will refer you for prosecution. You've broken U.S. law.
At an April 26th hearing, I asked Undersecretary James McCammett to provide me with what percentage of cases exist in your agency where a child has been separated from a parent or guardian since October of 2017, wherein the case resulted in trafficking charges. I've not been given that information. Can you provide that to me?
I do not have it now, but yes, I will provide it to you.
Okay, can you do that by the end of next week?
If we have the information, yes.
Thank you. I also asked that I be provided with what training and procedures are being given to CBP officers as it relates to how they are instructed to carry out family separation. I've not received that information. Do you have that today?
No, you have not asked me for it, so I do not have it. But
No, I
I'm happy
asked
to give
him
it
for
to you.
it. Okay, so again, by the end of next week, please.
Can you explain a little more what you're looking for?
Sure. So your agency will be separating children from their parents. And I
No,
would
what we'll be doing is prosecuting parents who've broken the law, just as we do every day in the United States of America.
I can appreciate that. But if that parent has a 4-year-old child, what do you plan on doing with that child?
The child under law goes to HHS for care and custody,
They will be separated from their parent.
just
And so
like
my
we do in the
question-
United States every day.
So they will be separated from their parent. And my question then is, when you are separating children from their parents, do you have a protocol in place about how that should be done? And are you training the people who will actually remove a child from their parent on how to do that in the least traumatic way? I would hope you do train on how to do that. And so the question is, and the request has been, to give us the information about how you are training and what the protocols are for separating a child from their parent.
I'm happy to provide you with the training information.
Thank you. And what steps are being taken, if you can tell me, to ensure that once separated, parent and child, that there will be an opportunity to at least sustain communication between the parent and their child?
The children are at HHS, but I'm happy to work with HHS to get you an answer for that.
And I'd like it to be broken down between what you're doing for children over the age of 4 and what you're doing for children under the age of 4. On May 4th, the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement on behalf of the organization stating that he is appalled by a new policy by the DHS that will forcibly separate children from their parents. He went on to talk about that they will create stressful experiences like family separation, which can cause irreparable harm, disrupting a child's brain architecture, affecting his or her short and long-term health. And these findings are generally shared by the American Medical Association and many child welfare advocates and professionals. Last Tuesday, before Senate appropriations, you testified that you are, quote, working with the community to understand the science as it relates to the impact of such separation. Do you dispute that separating a child from their parent will create and cause trauma for that child?
I believe the question that was asked to me if I was aware of the information, and what I said is I would be happy to look into the studies. Again, we do not have a policy to separate children from their parents. Our policy is if you break the law, we will prosecute you. You have an option to go to a port of entry and not illegally cross into our country.
Secretary Nielsen, we do have a policy in this country as a general matter in the justice system that if someone breaks the law, they will be prosecuted. We also have protocols about what is allowable and not in connection with an arrest, in connection with detention in a jail, in connection with how many hours or days with which we can bring charges or not. So to suggest that the only law in this country relates to what you do at the end is really misleading.
But that's not what I just said, ma'am. If you're asking if we train and we take care of them and we work with HHS, we now have a memorandum of agreement so that we can make sure that the children go to people who are actually family members and who are not traffickers and who won't abuse them.
Great. So those are the policies I'd like to see.
It is Wednesday, the 16th of May of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes. We could get rid of the meddlesome priest, but define meddlesome priest. Okay? You might be getting rid of a friend. You never know. You really don't ever know. Until it's too late. And that's the world we live in now. We get to attend to things instead of before they happen, because we know what will happen. We've seen it before. We've experienced it before. We've noted it before. And we've decided we're not going to let that happen again. We're not living in a world like that anymore. We live in a world in which we lurch forward, kick over a few things, and then we got to fix it later. If we're able to get up. Yeah, North Korea is playing the great negotiator, just like we said they would. Why would North Korea want to endeavor into an agreement that Trump just broke with Iran? I mean, Well, we knew this was going to happen. And it did. So I'm not shocked. But it puts, maybe it puts the world on the brink. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Some people want to have the apocalypse. Yeah, they're really idiotic, of course. And this isn't the first time that this end of times fervor has existed. You know, even within our own political construct, but down through history too. Well, we could go on and on and on. We could talk about the St. Louis cop who's outraged after seeing white men doing manual labor, building an authentic Mexican restaurant. Only Mexicans should be building a Mexican restaurant, especially if it's authentic. Well, there is, I'll say once again, there is a maximum IQ that's allowed to be a cop. So, I think this is emblematic of that policy coming to fruition. You can't have a cop that's too intellectual that actually knows the law, okay? Because how else will they be able to intimidate people with impunity if they know the law? Jeez. Oh, boy. Well, let's get on to what we're going to be attending to today because we have a lot, and we had a lot at the top. I just had to have Kamala Harris drilling down on Kirstjen Nielsen for, the policy of ripping children from their parents' arms and then taking those kids and incarcerating them in concentration camps on military bases. What kind of training do the people have when they rip these kids out of the arms of their parents and drag them kicking and screaming to concentration camps on military bases? Well, Kirstjen Nielsen will get back to Senator Harris on that, among other things. God, look, we're too close to that tectonic construct already. Do we need to go ever further? Can we just stop? On military bases, give me a break. It was only a few short years ago that crossing the border, without documentation, I'm not even counting people who are coming here as refugees and asylum seekers. Because those are the people that this government is going after with zeal. The refugees and the asylum seekers. I mean, they hate just the regular ones coming over here just trying to make a buck, And that's about all they make, is about $1. But that's too much for them. That they would rip these kids out of these parents' arms. When the policy, up until a few short years ago, was that it was really nothing more than a parking infraction. So what we are talking about is that you didn't put a quarter in the meter and now you lose your kid. Oh, and did I forget to tell you that we'll just forget where they are? Okay? Because we're so worried about child trafficking. You were transporting that kid in the car. You knew that if you didn't put the quarter in that parking meter that you would, be breaking the law. Even though it's a civil infraction. Because the law is a law. And you knew that if it took you 5 minutes more at the dry cleaners, that you would lose your kid. Because we're trying to get people not to do that anymore. Do you understand? We're doing it for your sake. Really, this hurts us more than it will ever hurt you. Yeah, so where are the 1,500 or more kids that the DHS lost? And ICE lost? Where are they? Oh, we don't know. Okay. Well, I'm going on. I apologize. Let me get into what we will be attending to today. Okay. Kamala Harris, thank you. Well, on the rest of the menu, that congressman who clashed with Maxine Waters recently on the House floor, He says it's un-American to acknowledge that racism exists. The Education Department will investigate Yale University based on a complaint by a University of Southern California graduate student who, by the way, has no affiliation with Yale. Well, that USC grad student, he claims that the Ivy League school discriminates against men. And this isn't the first time that he sued other universities over what he calls Title IX violations. And data from the National Postsecondary Student Aid Society reveals a troubling picture for black borrowers of student loans. Just like cars, your student loan, if you're black, you get to pay more interest. That's how we make things equal in America. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where as the Trump administration struggles to keep track of the usual hot spots, major trouble is brewing in forgotten corners of the world. And, for the first time, scientists have found that antibodies produced by the immune system can target multiple microbes as opposed to just one type of microbe. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl. So do go there. And also go to the leftish of the page there at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and you'll notice the donate contribute buttons, very integral parts of keeping Resistance Radio alive. And we are unable to do this without you. So thank you for your generosity. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. That's right. Tom takes care of that, and he'll give you a pithy response, and he gives pithy statements throughout the day, so check those out. You can also follow Netroots Radio on Facebook if you want to. We're there, and so there's that. And follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I do post show notes and links on Daily Co's, where I'm known as Justice Putnam, by the way. My real name, it is a given. You can get podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Okay, let's get into this first article about this Pennsylvania congressman, Mike Kelly. Josh Israel from Think Progress brings us this offering. Well, Kelly is very upset that Democrats think racial discrimination is still a problem. Days after a House floor clash with Representative Maxine Waters over the House Republican majority's decision to rescind Obama-era protections against auto lending discrimination. He complained yesterday on Fox and Friends that claims of modern-day racial inequalities are just not American. Kelly, an automobile dealer, argued that at a time when the economy is good, House Democrats should not raise this issue. Do you know how hard it is to close a deal? You know how many steps we have to get till we get to the manager to boost up the price? And let me tell you about a warranty. You want another warranty? We'll sell you another warranty. And talking about discrimination just gets in the way of closing the deal. And you know, only closers get coffee. And if you're looking at me right now, I need my coffee. Okay. I just think that if you come to the floor and there are 60 minutes to debate, 30 minutes on each side, but I was sitting there. I had 30 minutes of Democrats coming down and talking about how bad automobile people are because they discriminate against non-white buyers. I said, that's not America. We don't talk about those things. How many times have I heard that before? Oh, I should mention also, I have family members who are in the automobile industry. You know, selling high-end muscle cars for lots and lots and lots of money. That kind of thing. Or, you know, having the second largest wholesale auto dealership in Southern California. You know, that kind of thing. I know a little bit about how that industry works. And I know that Mike Kelly is upset that people look so disdainfully upon his industry of car salesmen. But I wonder why. Is it because of some sort of discrimination against auto dealers trying to gouge people buying a car? Well, yeah, you know, this is the kind of guy, and I got to tell you, you know, my Trump bro fought against the Lemon Law because it is buyer beware. You buy this car, too bad. When you're off the lot, it's your problem. I finally got rid of the problem, and I gave it to you, and you paid me money for it. And I talked you into paying more money also. So it's no wonder that this guy would be a Trumpster. So, yeah, it's un-American to acknowledge that racism exists because all races have said that. Offering up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is by Noor Al-Sabai out of Raw Story. The Department of Education has opened an investigation into whether Yale discriminated against men by offering scholarships that are exclusively awarded to women. No more Women's Tuesdays. You get half off on drinks. Everybody. According to the Yale Daily News, the complaint that led to the Department of Education Civil Rights Arm opening the investigation was filed by Kirstjen Christoph Pergos, a doctoral student at the University of Southern California who is unaffiliated with the Ivy League school. Well, let me remind you, the fight song that we always said that USC had was, "We are USC, we are USC, we pay our fee, we get our degree." And now it's like that everywhere. Pergos told the Yale Daily News that he used to identify as a feminist until, quote, he gradually realized that the fundamental assumptions of feminism are no longer valid. No more racism, no more need to let women get their way. At Yale, the student body comprises roughly equal numbers of men and women, the report noted. Pergos said it is unfair that unlike the initiatives targeted in the complaint, Yale does not have equivalent programs exclusively for men. Well, it's implied. They had to have rules so that they could allow Jewish people, so they could allow women, so they could allow anybody who wasn't a white male. Come on. If you're from Hungary, you would know. Oh, wait a second. You wouldn't, would you? Or maybe he does, and he wants to game the system. Okay, the USC students' complaint targeted 7 Yale women's groups and claimed they violated the Department of Education's Title IX protections against discrimination based on sex or gender. The report noted this is not the first time that Pergos has filed complaints at other universities for Title IX discrimination against men. And, of course, that investigation that the Department of Education has just launched comes less than a week after a white Yale student called police on a black classmate because she was napping in a commons area, and that's not allowed. The Department of Education has already investigated Yale in 2017 for similar claims of anti-male discrimination. I don't know why that last offering was considered to be the first offering, because it was the second offering, because this offering coming up now is the last offering that we have here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. I don't know. You'd think it was Monday. All right, well, this article is out of the Chronicle of Higher Education by Becky Supiano. For years, experts have worried about the disproportionate level of student loan debt borne by black students. Two new sources of evidence, federal data and a report on a controversial federal student loan program, add to an already disturbing picture. The federal data comes from the National Postsecondary Student Aid Study, which provides the more robust picture of student borrowing, and it has been released once every 4 years, but it will now be released every 2 years, so this data can be more readily accessible. Don't let Don know. He doesn't like information, especially when people know things. He likes his low information voter, you know. Well, Robert Kirstjen, an assistant professor of education, leadership, management, and policy at Seton Hall, posted a quick analysis of graduate students' debt by race from this last release of the Post-Secondary Student Aid Study. And what he found was that black graduate students with no debt was quite a bit lower in 2000 than their Asian, white, or Hispanic peers, but that proportion dropped sharply over time. Just more than half of white graduate students had no debt in 2000, a share that dropped to about 40% by 2016. By comparison, the start of the same period, 37% of black students carried no debt. By the end, only 17% did. And the racial disparities were even more striking when Kirstjen analyzed high debt borrowers, those who owed $100,000 or more. Back in 2000, relatively small percentages of graduate students had that much debt, no more than 2% for any group. Those proportions grew across the board over time, but the growth was unusually significant among black borrowers. In 2016, an astonishing 30% of African American graduate students had at least $100,000 in debt, nearly 3 times the rate of white students. So what accounted for it? Well, Kirstjen, for his part, suggests that the higher rates of borrowing among black graduate students is probably in part the result of their concentration in fields like education, which offer fewer assistantships. And then, of course, family resources likely play a crucial role. Family resources are the theme of the second new look at black student borrowing, a report on the Parent Plus loan program for New America, a nonpartisan public policy think tank. The report pulls no punches. It's called The Wealth Gap Plus Debt, How Federal Loans Exacerbate Inequality for Black Families. Now, this report was written by Rachel Fishman. And the Parent Plus is a federal loan program in which parents of undergraduates can borrow to fund their children's education and is used by black and white families. But Fishman writes, the program was created to give middle and upper income parents who are predominantly white access to fixed-rate, lower-interest loans for expensive institutions, but not black families. For the most part, as income increases, so does the share of plus borrowers, but for black families, it is exactly the opposite. And I might say it would be a feature, not a bug. You know, those work requirements only applies to black people if they live close to a city, but you know, those white people that actually comprise the most who are on assistance, you can't let them work. Look how sick they are. All right, let's get to our break, and then we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. When he worked in a pharmacy in Portugal, Fernando Moreira often encountered people who stopped by for performance-enhancing drugs, for their racing pigeons.
I saw it very often.
Pigeon racing is big business. A bird named Bolt, as in Usain, sold for nearly $500,000 a few years back. So there's a big incentive to breed faster birds and to illegally obtain performance-enhancing drugs for them.
Some doctors make prescriptions that are supposedly for the humans, for the owners of the pigeons, and then the owners of the pigeons administer those drugs to the animals.
Moreira says that the pigeon fanciers, as they're called, freely admitted who the drugs were really for, and though the drugs can cause heart attacks in the avian athletes, there wasn't much he could do about it.
We cannot prohibit them to buy these drugs because they have a prescription.
And so Moreira headed to the University of Port to get his doctorate, so he could figure out how to drug test pigeons and catch dopers in the act. He and his team started by interviewing pigeon fanciers anonymously about their drugs of choice, so he'd know what to test for. They spiked pigeon poop with 4 popular doping compounds, a beta blocker and 3 corticosteroids, and devised a test that uses mass spectrometry to quantify them. Then, in a more real-world scenario, they doped 2 pigeons with a corticosteroid and successfully used their method to screen the bird's feces, a test that still works as many as 3 days after the pigeon is drugged. The results are in the Journal of Chromatography B. Moreira's already been contacted by veterinarians interested in the test. And now that there's a way to quantify drug residues in pigeon poop, he says it'll be easier to keep owners who break the rules from improperly feathering their nests. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Welcome to 60-Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Abraham Lincoln tried to revive and renew political principles that defined America at its birth in 1776. At a speech in 1854 at Peoria, Illinois, Lincoln said, "Let us readopt the Declaration of Independence, and with it the practices and policy which harmonize with it." At Independence Hall in Philadelphia on February 22, 1861, Lincoln said, "I have never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the sentiments embodied in the Declaration of Independence." Lincoln's understanding of American constitutionalism was based on principles expressed in the Declaration of Independence. He believed the Constitution was meant to fulfill the ideas of equality, liberty, and government by consent of the people in the 1776 founding document. In his actions as president and citizen, Lincoln attempted to preserve the founding political principles and to bring them more fully and justly into the lives of Americans. Thus, he began the process through which slavery was abolished in the United States. That's all for today's podcast. 60-Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day Philadelphia longshoremen walked off the job. Led by the industrial workers of the world, the strike was remarkable for its militancy, its industrial unionism, and its interracial organizing. The Wobblies had been fighting to organize workers in the city for years. Unionizing efforts included Amalgamated Local 57, which organized workers across whole industries. Attracted to the IWW's message of interracial unionism, black longshoreman Ben Fletcher joined up readily and soon emerged as an early leader of Local 57 and then Longshoremen's Local 8. In his book, Wobblies on the Waterfront, historian Peter Cole notes the origins of the local started with the striking sugar refinery workers on the banks of the Delaware. Dockers made contact with the IWW during the strike and drew up a list of grievances and demands. And by this day in 1913, 1,500 longshoremen struck for a leveling of the hourly wage for all workers, regardless of skill, shorter hours, and union recognition. They held strike meetings every day and elected a committee of 15 with representatives from every ethnic and racial group. Cole notes this was crucial, given the diversity of the dock's 4,000 workers. More than a third were black, another third were immigrants. The committee included Poles, Jews, blacks, Irish, and others. Strikers took on their employers and also the police. Beatings, intimidation, and arrests of strikers occurred daily and intensified as the ship owners attempted to herd in scabs. 1,200 coal and iron ore handlers joined in on the strike. The port was solidly shut down, and by the end of the month, the shippers were forced to concede to most of the Wobblies' demands. Industrial unionism and interracial solidarity had won the day.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Tuesday, May 15th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. The United Nations agency, which focuses on matters of work in the world, is predicting that millions of jobs will be lost as the world transitions to greener economies. But, says the International Labour Organization, millions more jobs will be created. The organization also says the transition could be made more justly if social protection plans, such as unemployment insurance, were implemented. The ILO is a tripartite organization guided by representatives of governments, employer groups, and labor unions. It is strongly supported by the international labor movement. Here is a just recently released ILO audio report about the jobs that will be lost and the jobs that will be created by a transition to greener economies.
The transition to a green economy will profoundly affect the world of work. While some jobs will be lost, this will be more than offset by the number of new jobs created. In mitigating climate change, 80 million more jobs will be created. While 6 million jobs could be lost, mostly in fossil fuel-based industries, 24 million new jobs will be created, many of them in the renewable energy, manufacturing, and construction sectors. Introducing sustainable practices such as conservation and organic farming will change the landscape of rural economies and the tasks of the world's 1 billion people in agriculture. A circular economy in which goods are reused, recycled, remanufactured, and designed to last longer will result in as many as 6 million new jobs around the world. At the enterprise level, there are business opportunities in adopting sustainable practices. Through green jobs, workers are directly involved in the transition. Through social dialogue, policies which address adequate employment, skills training, and new industrial practices will contribute to a transition that not only creates economic opportunity, but is just for all workers.
The ILO report released this week, called Greening with Jobs, calls for better social protection plans for workers involved in the transition to greener economies.
As temperatures increase, precipitation patterns change, and weather-related disasters become more common and more intense, social protection policies can safeguard workers against the effects of environmental degradation and protect those negatively affected by the transition to a green economy. For example, unemployment protection schemes can support workers who lose their jobs in the transition towards an environmentally sustainable economy. Cash transfer programs can compensate workers for lost income due to extreme weather events. Public employment programs can achieve economic, social, and environmental objectives simultaneously. About half of them do already. Payment for ecosystem services schemes can offer cost-effective protection for the environment while also supporting household incomes. Extending social protection programs and green investment is financially viable and can promote economic growth, job creation, and a fairer income distribution.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Radio Labor's newscasts are available on its website, Facebook, iTunes, union websites, and community radio stations. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The deaths of at least 60 Palestinians on Monday in protests and clashes at the Israeli-Gaza border exposed deep and continued divisions on the UN Security Council on Tuesday, as Israel and the U.S. staunchly defended the decision by Israeli forces to use lethal force. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, said Israeli troops operated on the assumption that unless force was used against those seeking to damage or destroy a security fence separating Gaza from Israel, that Israeli towns would have come under direct attack.
I will ask today the ambassadors in this room, the ambassador of Bolivia, the ambassador of France, Sweden, I will ask them what they will do if a mob will enter their borders. What will be their reaction when you have thousands of people inside it running to the fence?
U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley largely echoed that sentiment, citing specific violent incidents carried out on Monday on the Gaza side of the border in order to defend actions by the Israeli military.
They light Molotov cocktails attached to kites on fire and attempt to fly them into Israel to cause as much destruction as possible. Who among us would accept this type of activity on your border? No one would.
But as has long been the case, the U.S. was outnumbered among its fellow Security Council members when it came to assigning responsibility for Monday's violence. The ambassadors of 5 European Union nations issued a joint statement calling on Israel to refrain from excessive force, while Kuwait's ambassador took things a step further, saying his country would soon introduce a resolution aimed at protecting Palestinian civilians from Israeli violence. On Monday, the U.S. blocked a resolution that would have called for an independent probe of the latest Palestinian deaths, despite that effort enjoying support from close U.S. allies like Germany and the United Kingdom. Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That's right. Okay, let's begin with weather from around the world. And we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, 60 degrees Fahrenheit here at the mothership at Positively 3rd and Marie. And we have merely rain, which will be increasing to showers shortly. We had big-time thunderstorm activity yesterday, so much so that I was worried that maybe we might get kicked off the air, meaning Netroots Radio, but we were solid. We were solid. So we're keeping our fingers crossed because we will still have a bit of thunderstorm activity today, though not as vociferous as yesterday. And copious amounts of mineral water fell from the sky, enriching the root systems of all the plant life in my gardens. And I say gardens because it's like a park here. Oh, so nice, so nice. So showers will be coming shortly, and we'll have a high of about 70 degrees, maybe a smidgen lower. And our low tonight will be in the mid-50s, though it'll probably be closer to 60. Here at the mothership at Positively 3rd and Marie. And grass pollen is still high if that bothers you. I don't have any data on air quality, though I kind of, my anecdotal personal nose gauge has determined that not too many people were burning wood, and if they were, the winds were blowing them away. So we'll see. And pressure is actually holding at 29.91 inches. Visibility is down to only 5 miles. And relative humidity is 87%. And now, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 56 and cloudy. Paris is 71 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 66 and mostly cloudy. Now, both Rome and Paris are under a flood advisory from, well, lots of wind, rain, and thunderstorms. Kiev is 76 and fair. Kabul is 62 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 77 and partly cloudy. Tokyo, oh my gosh, Tokyo is 71 and partly cloudy, and they are under a heavy wind and rain advisory as well. Interesting. Sydney, Australia is 54 and fair. San Francisco is 53 and mostly cloudy, and New York is 64 degrees with rain showers. Well, that's how you get Mayflowers still in June. And that is weather from around the world brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First offering here at the Chef's Table, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is by Stephen A. Cook out of Foreign Policy magazine. Many Americans are having a hard time keeping up with the torrid pace of events. On Friday, hardly anyone remembers what happened on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. Go ahead. Try asking someone. You'll see the gears turning furiously inside their minds, running through keywords: stormy, secondary sanctions, embassy, Kim Jong-un, Wall, Mueller, Cohen, Schneiderman, Farrow, grasping for an accurate timeline. It is hard, not to mention exhausting, to be 3 stories behind the news cycle all the time. Recently, and for obvious reasons, President Donald Trump's decision to breach the Iran nuke deal, the upcoming summit between he and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, which has been coincident with a crisis in Gaza, not to mention the capital's atypical Stanley Cup playoff success, have gripped Washington. The first 3, at least, are consequential stories that, for better or worse, will affect the United States foreign relations for many years to come. Yet, for all the potential dangers involved in the U.S. break from the Iran deal, the high-stakes diplomatic maneuvers with North Korea, and the trouble surrounding the embassy move, These are issues that have been front and center in global affairs for a long time. No one would be surprised if violence resulted from any one of them. Now, that's in contrast to the trouble brewing in other parts of the world, policies that the policy community either assumes are stable, forgets about, or never actually has thought about before. Many people have said, did you know? Whenever you hear Trump say, many people didn't know. Did you know? Because he didn't know. Now, for example, the Aegean Sea, where Greek and Turkish warplanes routinely engage each other in a long-running dispute over territory and airspace. Why, that's really nice, isn't it? Then there's Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yes, the Balkans are back. They're the new orange, you know. And with the same ethno-nationalist chauvinism that tore the region apart about a century ago. Will we back the Serbs instead of the Croats this time? Let's find out. It seems that nationalist Serbs are no longer willing to live with arrangements that brought peace to the region. Wouldn't you expect that? With white nationalism on the march once again. And with the 1995 Dayton Accords, Milorad Dodik, the leader of the Republika Srpska, that Serb part of the country, including the country's second largest city, Banja Luka, has been agitating to leave the Bosnian Serb-Croatian Federation. Well, nice for him, then. In his endeavor to break up the country, Dodik has received political and material support from Serbia, the Serbian Orthodox Church, and Russia. Well, that's really nice. So let's just forget about all of these other parts of the world. Now, if war doesn't break out in the Aegean or in the Balkans, it might in the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa. The Egyptians are at loggerheads with the Ethiopians over the construction of the great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It's not just any ordinary dam. It knows about science and literature. It can build a house and write a poem too, just like a modern Renaissance dam. Well, the dam does threaten a 1950s treaty that gives Egypt the bulk of the Nile River's water. Well, it's not a Renaissance dam then, is it? Because they have to be masters in diplomacy as well. Jeez. Okay. Then there is the presence of the Emirati forces in Eritrea. Now, they're Egyptian allies, of course. The Eritreans, the Emirati forces are Egyptian allies in Eritrea. The Eritreans have fought 2 wars with Ethiopia since they formally seceded from it in 1993. Gee, did anyone know about that? Did anyone care? Yeah, everybody but America, because we're exceptional. Not every problem in the world has an American solution. What? Yes, it does. We could solve anything. But when it comes to the Aegean, Bosnia, and the Red Sea, the U.S. might very well have a constructive role to play. There is precedent for U.S. diplomatic intervention to keep the conflict between Greece and Turkey from deteriorating. In 1996, Richard Holbrooke, he was that anti-American guy that used diplomacy instead of like a big stick. Okay. Worked the phones to find a way for Athens and Ankara to climb down from what surely would have been a disastrous confrontation over a pair of rocks in the Aegean called Imia or Karnak. Sort of like their own little Falkland Islands, depending on what you call it. The U.S., Turkey, and Greece are different now, but Washington is the only part that can de-escalate tension in the Aegean. But would they want to? In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Trump administration does not even need creative diplomacy, given that it already exists in the form of the Dayton Accords. But you can't not resurrect Holbrooke, because he died in 2010. And good riddance, apparently. But it would not take much to breathe new life into the post-war structures that were supposed to oversee the implementation of Dayton. Well, of course, that would mean that the U.S. and the EU would have to work together, and we can't have that because they are the hostile foreign power trying to keep us from, giving our wealth, treasure, and everything we are as Americans to a Cyrillic alphabet. Yep. Finally, almost all the parties in the various disputes in the Red Sea are U.S. allies. Really? Do they know that? At the same time, the Emiratis do not need an expeditionary force in Eritrea. Most important, Washington needs to get involved in the negotiations over the Nile waters. The U.S. has the expertise and the attention of every country involved. It seems unlikely that anyone will come to blows, so long as the U.S. is facilitating talks on the way forward. Does anybody trust us anymore, though?
Dansez maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
Okay, last offering here is by Kara Marker out of Lab Roots, and from a study that was published in the journal Nature Immunology. The German Cancer Research Center has a new study and discovery of universal antibodies that will change the way scientists understand the immune response. Potential therapeutic use of antibodies is gaining importance because resistance to antibiotics is becoming ever more frequent, explained Heidelberg's Hedda Vardaman. Antibodies are, of course, immunoglobulin molecules produced by the adaptive immune system in response to a specific pathogenic attack on the body. They target and neutralize unique sugar structures on the surfaces of bacteria and viruses. Because of this, scientists often classify microorganisms by the sugar structures on their surfaces. Well, I've got the sugar on my back. Okay, in their new study, scientists collected antibodies against a bacterium called Klebsiella pneumonia from the blood of healthy individuals. Now, this bacterium is mostly harmless bacteria for healthy people with strong immune systems. In fact, nearly half of all humans carry it in their nose and the gastrointestinal tract. The bacterium only causes diseases in people with weakened immune systems. Researchers observed that the antibodies targeted multiple different subgroups of Klebsiella as well as other bacteria, yeasts, and viruses. The antibodies are able to attach to any sugar structure that included a structure called mannose. So, people who have weakened or suppressed immune systems, such as transplant patients or the elderly, are susceptible to this bacterium. It's extremely resistant to antibiotics, making the development of new treatment particularly important. So blood poisoning is caused by bacteria and must be treated quickly, Vardaman explained. Well, decades ago, the first antibiotics were discovered, produced, and applied to treat devastating bacterial infections. In present day, antibiotics are misused. Yeah, let's take a diluted form and spread it on their surfaces, so that these bacteria will, get a resistance to the diluted strain. And then they're stronger against the more potent strain, which is no longer potent. Yep. Okay. Antibodies have already been tested in mice as a therapeutic application for treating infections, and the studies have been successful thus far. Going forward, scientists will design new studies to conduct in humans in a clinical setting. We'll just do it how we do it in America. Pass it as safe and give it to everybody and study it there. Well, regardless, we need to find something because we've misused antibiotics for so long, or maybe not that long at all, and we've messed up. And this looks like quite a discovery. We'll keep track of it. So, okay, well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period, but we will be back tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday. Stay tuned for the rest of the day for breaking news on Netroots Radio. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.